Welcome to Absolutely Not, the live podcast series dedicated to providing examples of setting personal boundaries at work and the vocabulary needed to name harm in those spaces. Hey everyone. Oh, thank y'all so much for being here on Absolutely Not. Thank you for continuously showing up to this space because it helps me grow this community. Real quick, today is the show's 1 year anniversary. Oh my goodness, I'm already about to cry. I just wanted to thank y'all for holding it down, like seriously holding it down, because if none of y'all showed up, I wouldn't have continued, you know? And I love y'all for real from the bottom of my heart for doing that. So thank you so much. Let me move past that. The key words for this episode are balance, wellness, and life. I encourage y'all to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with one of 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with your therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutelynot for more information and to get 10% off your first month. This link can also be found in the show notes. Today's episode is titled, get ready, The Lie of Work-Life Balance. I mean, okay, y'all already know what is good. And I'm excited to talk about this topic with our amazing special guest, Alejandra Hernandez, her. She is the founder of Empower Her Change, where she guides individuals out of feeling stuck and confused in their career to feeling confident and purpose-filled. Ooh. As a child of immigrant parents, she mastered the job search and career clarity process through trial and error in the corporate space. She entered entrepreneurship as a way to coach in her own unique way, inspiring a life of productivity, economic freedom, and fulfillment. Yes. She identifies as first-generation American and Latina. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Katrina. I am so honored to be here. I love what it is that you do, and it's your 1 year anniversary. Yes, I'm here for it.
Oh, please do not remind me. I can't believe we made it here, but nigga, we made it. Okay. But thank you so much for being here. I am moved, very much moved by the title of this episode, The Lie of Work-Life Balance. Alejandra, is it a lie? Is that a lie?
So here's what I mean when I talk about the lie of work-life balance. And I think we are all beginning to see this lie. And when you talk about the beginning of this episode, the words balance, wellness, and life, well, when we think about the definition of balance, the definition of balance is really about different elements aligning and being equal. So when you think about a scale, you have to have different elements in order for that scale, in order to balance it out, in order to create balance. It's about different elements equaling out. And that's what I think we are all recognizing is work is not different from life. And we've somehow created this narrative that what we do for work is going to be a separate thing for how we show up in life, that the identities that we hold in life are not the identities that we're going to have at work, and that the way that we feel in our life needs to be separate and somehow make up for the ways that we feel at work. And it's simply just not the way that it works. There are no different elements. There are different elements of the aspect of life in which, as an umbrella, work falls under, along with relationships, along with, being a dog mom, along with so many other things, your hobbies. But when we think about work and life, it just really boggles my mind that we've all consumed, including me, this idea that it's something separate and needs to be balanced out with everything outside of work. And that's the biggest thing that I want to share here on this episode today, is that that's what's the lie. We're realizing when we freaking feel gaslit, when we feel unsafe, when we feel like just straight up miserable in our jobs, it impacts our life because guess what? They're not separate things. It falls under the umbrella of life. And that's the really big lie about work-life balance. It's about really getting clear about what we want to see in our lives and how work fits into that whole puzzle of this grand scheme of life.
Yikes. Like so much, somebody out there, me, is listening to
Mhm.
this and it's just like, wow, that was really hard to hear. And I have
Mhm.
never in my life heard that before. Alejandra, who told you this? Where did you get this
Oh,
information?
oh, that's such a good question. Where did I get this info? I mean, as a career coach, I have definitely looked at so much work in the leadership space, in the career coaching space. And so I don't know if there was one particular person who triggered this for me, but I must have heard it. There's not one person that I can credit particularly, but I think as I just continued to go on and I began to realize how I had many times I really have held on to the identity of being a hard worker. And that has led to me overworking myself. It's led to me tying in worth with work. It's led to me really just feeling incredibly rejected whenever I felt like work wasn't going well. And so when I looked back at the concept, I was like, that makes so much sense because I was going in loops and I was feeling so unhappy in my life. And it was because I kept trying to make work this particular thing that was outside of my life. Like if I could just go to work and I could just do things afterwards that would be really fun and maybe fulfilling, then it would make up for it. But it's fucking bullshit. Like I would just leave and I'd be exhausted. I wouldn't want to do anything. And I must have heard this somewhere. So I don't want to say I like came it up with myself, but it just clicked. I clicked for me and I was like, oh my gosh, it's not separate. It's not separate. And it's the reason why my health is taking a hit. It's the reason why I am feeling this way and just feeling unfulfilled. It's because my work is not a reflection of the person that I am and the person that I want to be. And the person, like, I don't want to change gears. I don't want to feel like an outcast at work. And so that's really where it began. Like the minute I heard it, it just connected. And I knew that that was true for me.
And I knew that that was true for me. When you were describing what you felt or what you believed before you knew about the lie, I thought about like how people believe like, oh, let me take my uniform off and then I'm a whole different person, or all of the
Mhm.
weight of everything that's happening at work, just I hang it up on the back of my door and I can just live a free life. That's not
Mhm.
true. And you know, and now that you know that, I mean, how are you constantly assuring other people know that? Are you constantly telling people about the lie?
Yeah, especially my clients. Like we really go through that with my clients. And listen, here's the thing, Katrina. Like for some people, I really think it depends on where the person is. For some people, work is something that is really here to fuel them. And for them, it's like, okay, how do we find something that is really representative of what matters to you, of what skills you love to use, and things like that. For other people, I have particular clients, and this happens more so, especially with parents where they're like, listen, work doesn't have to be Disneyland. Like I want to be able to use my skills in a way that I enjoy, and I want to be respected, and I want to have the balance of like flexibility. It doesn't have to be like all my friends are my colleagues and we got to do like happy hours. I want a place where I can be respected, where there can be flexibility, and where I enjoy the work that I do. I get a lot of my fulfillment from outside of work. I have some clients who are like that.
Mm.
And so it's important to really recognize where you are. If you're the kind of person where work is really where you get your community, where you get your connections, where you get that sense of purpose, one, I would definitely expand that outside of work as well. However, I would also say then, yeah, just see where you're at and go from that place. And again, I've been someone who's very often been on the hamster wheel of work is my life and what I do is work. And so just being able to break that cycle is such a shift in identity and like my worthiness and how I matter. And that is the work to do, is really being able to see where you are. I think it's very dangerous when everything becomes about work, the sense again, like all your friends and all your purpose is centered in work, because again, it's only one piece of the whole puzzle of life. It's like, what are your relationships like? What are your hobbies like? What are the things that you enjoy doing? So yeah, that's kind of where I stand when it comes to that.
I cannot thank you enough for breaking that down because you use the word identities. And so often I share my identities with a lot of people, and then I ask them, okay, what are your identities? And they're kind of
Mhm.
stumped. They'll be like,
Mm.
I am a person, or I am,
Mhm.
so confusing to me. I'm like, oh, you
Yeah.
have nothing outside of this.
Yeah.
Alejandra,
Yeah. Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
constantly embracing the outside of this? Are you, I mean, you're
So much.
capable of saying your identities. Like, when did that happen? When did you start realizing, oh, that's not my only identity?
Oh, I mean, I would say like 2 years ago. Like this is pretty new in the grand scheme of my 29, nearly 30 years of life. It's, one of the things that happened for me, Katrina, was I began to do a lot of the career clarity work. Like I said, anything that I do with my clients now, it's a lot of it I had to just kind of figure out through trial and error. And when I began to do a lot of career clarity work, I also began to do a lot of personal development. I began to really understand what my values are. I began to understand, like, what does it mean to have a vision for my life, and what do I want people to say about me when I'm no longer physically here. And what I began to realize is I'm not talking a lot about my work. I began to realize, like, I'm talking about me being a loving wife, and me being a present mother, and me being a person who's in service, and me being someone who invites people over for dinner. And part of it is work. There's a couple of lines in my mission statement where it's, being a trailblazer for women's leadership. That is a part of my mission statement. I realized, though, in that process, that my life and my actions were not reflective, balancing out my day to day. My day to day was representing work, 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 walk the dog, eat some dinner with, partner, and then read and sleep. And it was like work, work. And there was not a balance between all the pieces in my life, including work. And that's where I began to recognize, okay, there's an imbalance here. How do I begin to balance this out? Because I know at the end of the day, when I am no longer here, it's not about only the work, it's a piece of it. So how do I begin to balance that out? How do I make sure my day to day is a reflection of what I want my vision to be for myself? And that was where the work really began. And you talked about identities. Like, there's identities that we know about, and then there's the identities that we don't at all. Like I said, there's the identity of I'm a hard worker. I didn't really know I had that identity until it really just hit me in the face. And I was just like, oh, this is why I'm burnt out all the time. It's because my worth is connected to my work, and therefore I overwork myself in order to feel worthy. And I have this identity of I am a hard worker. And so even recognizing those identities that I didn't know I had but are so clearly there, it's so important to bring those to light and be like, is that the identity I want? Nah. And then you change it from that place.
The amount of honesty you would have to have with yourself, and being honest about, where did I get that identity from? I grew up in a Black and Samoan household. I know where I got that hard worker identity from. I know exactly where I got it from. Alejandra, was it difficult for you to be honest about where some of these identities may have stemmed from?
Yeah. Yeah. There's some more than others. So, one that's completely not related to, like, well, that's not true. It is related to my work. However, there was an identity that, to be very honest, I'm still working through. And it's this identity of I'm not sexy. And that was really, it still kind of pings my heart. It's like, really, I saw where that came from, and it came from sexual energy repression when I was a child and not speaking about it. And the way that manifested itself was I'm not creative. And that showed up in the workplace a lot, because sexual energy and creative energy is really hand in hand. And so when you really feel like I felt like, oh, I'm not sexy, it came from sexual energy repression that also translated to I'm not creative. So I just never really felt like I had the ability to create, to be visionary, to see things outside of like anything that's like administrative and tell me what to do and these things. So it does come up in work, because again, it's the whole scheme of life and these different aspects that come up. That was a very, very hard identity for me to look at, was like, where did that come from? Because for a long time, I just was kind of like, even when I got into the personal development space, I was like, oh, it's because, I'm more like grounded. I'm a Virgo. It's like I'm Earth, all those things. And then I really had to look at it one day, and it's like, no, girl, it's because it's some trauma from your childhood. You weren't allowed to express sexuality. And so you interpreted that as it needs to be repressed, and therefore you repressed yourself in many other ways. And that was a really hard one for me to look at. And it still is something I'm working through for sure, to like see that and pivot that. And how do I work through that?
Ooh, leave me alone. There are so many people in so many communities who have been suppressed or oppressed for so many years, just in so many facets, in so many ways, and they haven't had the opportunity or the ability to really look into their identities, because maybe they came from communities who weren't approving of or created spaces where they were able to look into those new identities, surrounding anything beyond what the communities they came from. Do
Mhm.
you have safe spaces now where people are allowing you to look into those identities?
Do I have those safe spaces? Yes. So one of the ways, and again, it's not something that I recommend personally to anyone unless they do their own work and really see if it's right for them, is plant medicine. To be very honest, has helped me a lot. And plant medicine specifically with shamans who create that space has been really helpful for me to be able to see those things and be able to process it and be able to integrate, is kind of the word that's used in that world, is after a ceremony, is how do you integrate that. And that's really where the work is. It's the same thing like when you read a bunch of personal development books, you can read all you want, but are you integrating it? Are you embodying it? Are you being a person of integrity? Are you living by this thing that you say you want to live by? And so that has been a really great space for me to be able to, but specifically to find someone that I trust, that I feel like knows what they're doing, and that is creating a safe container for people to be able to do that. That's one space for me. Another space for me is coaching. I have my own coach as well. And that's important for me because it's hard to see your own identity sometimes when you've lived in it your whole life. And so that's been really supportive for me. Having my own coach has really allowed me to be like, oh, okay, that's actually what's happening. I would say those are the two big things that have been the most supportive for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't think anybody has shared the plant medicine part. So I was like, I mean, I'm gonna go look into it, but I love that you prefaced it with, hey, this works for me. It might not work for y'all. Like it may not.
Mhm.
Have you had to kind of, I know you say trial and error a lot, but like what are some other things you kind of tried and was like, oh, that does not work for me?
Ooh, what are some things that do not work for me? Um, hmm, that's such a good one. So this is the first thing coming up. I don't know if it'll be a direct answer to your question. One of the things that I have been calling in for 2022 is sisterhood. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends. And I grew up with the identity, talking about identities, of a loner. Oh,
Mhm.
I'm just a loner, the black sheep. I just don't like people. And of course, long story short, it's rooted in trauma. And so, surprise. And so, I had that identity a lot. So, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I had, a few here and there. And I've, even up until this point, it has to be something so intentional for me to be able to grow sisterhood. So, one of the things that doesn't work for me is when I get in this mindset of like, you have to go and make it happen and invite them out and do all those things. And it's like, we live in such a make it happen world. And listen, there's room for that. But I was realizing like, now I'm just forcing friendships that I don't really want. And that didn't really work for me. Like that, for me, it was about, let me go to spaces, show up as me, and let me cultivate relationships with those that I want to cultivate with, and really accept whenever I feel like I'm not being valued or I'm not feeling heard. It's not about like saying it again over and over again and keep going and keep going and keep trying and keep pushing. That didn't work for me when it came to building sisterhood. So that was like, that's the first thing that comes up for me. But I'm sure there's a lot of other things because I try so many different things that just quite frankly don't work, or maybe they work for a little bit, and then I realize like actually I'm just forcing something that doesn't feel good for me.
No, I'm just forcing something that doesn't feel good
Uh-huh.
for me.
Mhm.
When you were describing your the ways that you're trying to create sisterhood and the ways you've seen it like through other people, I think about like social media, how it's developing into like reels and stuff like that. And I see a lot of people doing it. And I remember trying to jump into it. I'm like, oh, let me start making reels. Let me start doing it. But that's not me. Like I literally, I could not get the lip sync right. I could not do the dances or whatever. I was like, Katrina, sit down. Like we already are doing what we are meant to do. Did you have like a moment like that, or did somebody have to tell you to sit down at some point?
No, I told myself to sit down the same way. Girl, reels. Like I went in and I was like, okay, I got to do all the reels. And so in the beginning of entrepreneurship, it was like, okay, my website, my branding, all the different things. I need to do all the reels. And so I was doing reels and I did it for a while. And the thing that really messed me up, Katrina, and this is really important that I want your people to hear, is I was getting good feedback from people and I kept doing it, even though I hated it, even though I felt so drained every single time because the lip sync wasn't right and I had to redo it. And it was like 2 hours to get 1 30-second reel. And I kept getting good feedback. And that was actually part of the reason why I kept going, because I was like, well, people really like it. It's resonating with people. And then I was like, well, what about me? What about me? And I had to get to that point where I was like, enough. If I want to do a reel, it's because I want to do a reel and I'll do it. My main stream of content is not going to be reels. Why? Because I don't like it. And so that whole thing too of like, there's things that I don't like and that I keep doing. And I do develop okay, this is going to be, okay, I can do this now. Reels was just not one of them. And so that was a big thing, is like, for anyone, that happens a lot with careers, is like people keep doing a certain path or they keep climbing a certain ladder because they're getting good feedback. You're so good at that. You're such a hard worker, blah, 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 blah. And then they wind up getting to a role and they're like, I didn't choose any of this. I don't want this. And so that's a big one. It's like, I was the same way with reels, same thing with branding, like working on a website. Honestly, it's like, for why? I'm just starting out, like just work with some people, help some people, start there. And I just allowed a lot of the information to kind of just distort me and think that I had to do 100 things at one time.
And the people that I was trying to keep up with or whatever, they have teams. They have like whole peoples. Like, but thank you so much for being honest about that. I love the question, what about me? It begs the balance. It asks for the balance. Are there any other questions that you have to ask yourself, kind of pertaining to what about me on like a daily basis?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that comes up for me is, well, what about me? Is this what I really want to do? And then the other one that I specifically ask, I work with a system called human design, and we won't get into that too much here because it's a whole thing, but I work with a system called human design. And according to what I know about me, one of the questions I ask myself regularly is this how I want to be recognized? And that was really important for me, because if I can get really caught up in looking at other people, like, wow, she said she just hit, 1 million, she's doing all these courses, she's doing all these reels and all those different things. And I had to really ask myself, do I want to be recognized as that? And sometimes it's just like, no, I don't want to be recognized as a person who has, 20 courses that you can choose from. It just doesn't, it's not bad. It's just not what I want to be recognized for. And that's a question that I ask myself pretty often as well, is like, is this how I want to be recognized as? Because we can get caught up in like the ego or feeling really good about someone saying something about us, which is completely normal. Is that how you want to be recognized, is really the question.
Damn, that is a really good question, especially for people, entrepreneurs out there. It is easy for us to go into different lanes. One time I found myself making a TikTok about natural hair. And I was like, Katrina, what does that have to do with what we do? Like, what does that have to do with what we do? So that is a really good one. Is this how I want to be recognized? And that'll really, like, tunnel vision, like, this is what we're doing. If it doesn't pertain to that, then I can't do it. I really cannot do it. Man, when was the last time you had to tell somebody or yourself, I really cannot do it?
Oh, I mean, it's so good to be able to know this and say this, because the first year of entrepreneurship, like, first year of entrepreneurship is like, what's going on? There's a lot of things going on. You don't really, I don't really know. I'm hoping this is going to work, but I don't know if it's going to work. And I'm seeing the bank account go down and I'm like, okay, I need to make this work. And so the first year gets just really intense. And I had a lot of personal things happen in the first year of starting my business as well. So it feels really good to get to this place now. But just so that people know, it was not like this in the first year at all. I've had a couple of things where I'm like, listen, I don't think that this is the right thing. And so one of them was someone who was looking for support for a doctor, that, you know, a recruiter that was looking for help for a doctor, but the doctor knew they wanted to be a doctor. They just needed help finding that role. And I was like, can I help you? Yes, I would be able to, but that's literally not what I do. Like, I work with women who are ready to step into leadership. I work with women who are tired and fed up of where they've been, and they're ready to be confident. They're ready to really access creativity. They're ready to really show up in the workplace. Like, that's not the right thing for me. And before, it would be like, I would crave for anything because I'm like, money. It's like anything that could come in the door. Now I got to a place where it's like getting super clear about what it is, the work that I do, and things that are outside of that. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. And I'm beginning to do that too with, this is like, I would say over the past year, with even people like who invite me to do things. Like, it sounds silly, but like I had a friend invite me to do some kind of like reading challenge where they would do like read a summary every day and talk about the books. And I love reading, but I looked at it and I was like, I don't want to do that. And part of me, like before, would be like, oh, but you just could, it would be nice. Like, they're your friends, you really like them. And I had to look at it and just be like, this looks really amazing. I'm actually reading this book right now that I want to go really deep in, and this isn't the right time. And so I'm beginning to like say no to things that I'm recognizing that's not what I want to do. It's very, very new. And in particular with work, it feels really good to get to a place where I feel like financially okay, because this is a huge thing I talk about with my clients. The reason why career can get so scary for people is because career is tied to money, and money is tied to survival. Money is what we use to pay for our food. It's what we use to pay for our homes. And so in a very real way, money is tied to our ability to survive. And so when people look at career, it can be very scary for them to make changes because that's the way that they tie it in to survivability. And so that is the same with entrepreneurship. I had to get to a place where I had to recognize that's no longer for me. And in order to say no to that, I'm making room for what I really desire to be recognized as, what I really desire to do for myself.
I love that so much. And I love that for all the people that are going to hear that, because that survivability part is where people get stuck. Like, oh, if I make this pivot, I won't be able to pay bills. I won't be able to buy groceries. And like, sis, is that even true? Like for you, like you probably have money in your bank account. And if you don't, then start building a support system or people around you who will be able to help you. Is there anybody in your support system that you'd like to shout out, like specifically?
Oh Lord. Okay. I would say two people, you know, my mom and my partner. My mom, like, listen, this woman has a second grade education, came to the States from rural Colombia, and she doesn't really know what the hell I do, to be quite honest. She doesn't know. And that woman supports me and she is my number one cheerleader. She just believes in me in a way that is so heartwarming, because when I'm scared and I'm going, you know, I quit my job before I became an entrepreneur. I quit my job and I went to go travel for a bit. You know, I've told my mom those things, and so many would have, especially immigrant parents, would have an immigrant parent be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? Like, you need to be able to stay in your job. You need to have stability. My mom has, not that she didn't have those thoughts, but my mom has always supported me. She has always believed in me. And that, I think, has supported me greatly in being able to do the things that I do and do these things in trial and error. So I would say my mom, she's a huge inspiration for me and what she's been able to do with her life. And then my partner is absolutely amazing, Alvi. He is always really supportive of me, and he's a coach as well. And he was a coach when I met him, and he actually really helped me to kind of begin to see the ways that I was getting stuck in that, oh, I'm a hard worker, and I'm getting stuck in the, I'm too broke, I can't leave, when really I had money in the bank account. It's just like survivability. It's like, I have to save it all. I can't use that money. I have to save it. What if something happens? And he was able to really help me see that really I do have it. I'm just afraid of this aspect. So he has been incredibly transformative in like my ability to believe in myself and do the things that I do. And he's he's very balanced and masculine and feminine too. Like he's very, in my opinion, he has like that strong, dominant, masculine energy. Yet I also feel safe and nurtured and cared for. And that's a really, really fine balance to find. And he has that. So it's been really great to have my mom and my partner as part of my journey in this.
Mhm. And I know y'all heard that again, balance. So the people around you have to be balanced as well, or you won't be able to keep that balance.
Yeah.
When we talk about work environments where people around you who are just like, nah, this is how it is. Like, this is how we keep doing this. Those people are not balanced, or they don't care about the balance. So obviously everyone around is not going to be balanced, including yourself. Somebody did ask a question in the chat. They said, Katrina, is there anyone supportive that I would like to shout out, or that you would like to shout out? And quite honestly, the support system that I have now is my therapist. I have a coach, and I have my family members, and I have very few friends, and I keep my circle very small. But the community of Absolutely Not is literally my support system. I cannot thank y'all enough for showing up and just being so about it. Like, it is ridiculous. I literally never thought anybody would listen to this shit, and it is beyond me why y'all listen to this shit. But I cannot thank y'all enough for doing so. So that's my support system to a T right now. Alejandra, before we go, there are going to be so many people who are going to say, oh, let me get clarity. Let me balance myself out today, whether they're an entrepreneur or they're in their jobs right now. What would be the top 3 tips you would share with them about gaining that clarity and just flipping over the lie of work-life balance?
Yeah, of gaining that clarity. So one would really be know who you are. And so how do you get that clarity? One of the early exercises that I love to do with my clients is doing exercises around what are your values, and really think about the work that I talked about in the beginning is, what are people going to say about you when you're no longer physically here? What are people going to say about you at that funeral? And I think that's so important and so eye-opening, because then you can begin to see like, damn, what I'm working on all the time is actually not what I want people to say about me. So that's a really great first one, is think about that vision, think about long term, like what do you want people to say about you? Not because what they say matters necessarily, but because what they say is a reflection of who you are. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be specific. And when I say that, I don't mean like some people are proponent of this, like people who do manifestation work, like be very specific, like what house and where and all those things. I don't do that. I don't necessarily think it's wrong. But when I say be specific, I mean really be specific about the values that you have and the behaviors that you exhibit when you live by those values. Okay. So as an example, my values are nourishment, integrity, and in service. So it's good. It's really nice to know those words, but how do I show up on a regular basis because of those words, and be specific about that? I call my mom once a week because that is nourishment for me. And so being specific in that way. And then the third is like hold space for the trial and error. Be okay with the fact that sometimes it's going to get out of balance. It's literally a part of life. And then you bring it back in balance. Is really being able to hold space for that compassion, for that forgiveness, and for the awareness of, oh, okay, I went a little bit off track. How can I get back on track? And how can I allow myself to learn that lesson and let it go? Those would be the 3.
Oh, and it feeds into that last one, feeds into all of them, like the awareness part, like, hey girl, we did not go on that walk today. Like, I understand it is that time, like, but we need to move it along. Like, what are we doing today? We have one last question for you before we let you go. And it's for the what about me question that we had earlier. Amazing question. When you are working on project with others, how do you communicate that boundary with others, whether it's a team or your audience? The what about me question.
Can you reword that just one more time, Katrina, the question?
So I'm guessing because we're constantly having to ask ourselves, what about me? We're trying to bring balance to spaces. But what if you're working on a project? How would you kind of communicate to them, like, I need to focus on the what about me?
Oh, okay, great. So one of the big things, and this is why, honestly, like going back to the three I just gave, that is actually why it would be so important in projects and in teams and in families. When you know who you are, you're specific and you're holding the space, you're then able to communicate that to them. You can let them know from that place of clarity and specificity of exactly, hey, right now, this is where I am. This is what I really need in order for me to feel okay, to feel safe, to feel nourished. And then from there, remember, these are other people. You do not have control over them. You have control over what you communicate. You also have control over how you handle whatever their reaction is. And that's really where the work becomes, is it now, if it is possible, can you remove yourself? If it's not possible, can you pivot the way that you're working with this person? That's where the work really comes in. But communication, which only comes from really knowing what it is that you're communicating and being specific about it.
Oh, knowing exactly what you are communicating, because if I start communicating out of anger or out of like, you just disrespected me, I need to let you know that you disrespect me. What am I really communicating? Like, what am I really getting across? They're not going to know anything if I don't know what I'm trying. Oh, that part. Thank you so much for breaking it down with us today. That was good. The nourishment word, that's about to be the word that I have to write that down. Where am I gaining nourishment? Are there any last minute sprinkles that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap it up today?
Oh my gosh. Well, first, this has been amazing. And in terms of where you can find me, so it's Empower Change, and I spell empower EMPOHER. So I add her at the end. You can find me on LinkedIn, AI Hernandez, and please do connect with me. I love, love, love hearing from people, speaking to people about where they are in their careers. I'm going to be hosting a 3-day workshop on overcoming imposter syndrome. So that's coming up and I'm excited to share. So feel free to connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. Holla at me. I'm happy to have a conversation with any of you.
Yay. And all of that information will be in the show notes when this is published. Thank y'all so much for tuning in and for showing up. This is the space where we are cultivating conversations around how we're going to communicate our needs to other people. And I cannot thank y'all enough for continuously participating in this space, because then I'll know what you need and you will know what I need. But until next time, please keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Absolutely Not. Your support means the world to me. You can always further support the show by leaving a review or visiting the Support the Mission page on my website, www.katrinastroll.com. My website is also where you can register for upcoming live episodes, watch amazing past episodes of Absolutely Not, and buy Absolutely Not merch. Yay! Until next time, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. See you next time.